Welcome everyone to this session on making instant payment more inclusive and in particular ensuring that women are not left behind. Over the next 45 minutes, we'll explore what concrete steps can be taken from policy and regulation to product design to advance women's financial inclusion. I repeat what I mentioned earlier for the previous session. So this is a breakout session. So please feel free to engage and interrupt at any time by raising your hand, and we'll move around. The idea is really to make this interactive. So joining me today to discuss this topic are Faith from the Rwanda Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning, Jedida from the COMESA Clearinghouse, and Joanna from Glenbrook Partners. Perhaps could you please briefly introduce yourself?
Good afternoon. I will go first. My name is Jedida. I lead the COMESA Clearinghouse. COMESA is a regional economic bloc of 21 member states. And the Clearinghouse is one of its institutions whose mandate is to facilitate efficient settlement of payments for goods and services across borders for its member states. And we run several initiatives, and key for us related to this topic is a digital retail payment platform, which is a platform where we are making sure that we have inclusion in terms of on the financial sector for women, youth, the underserved, and then MSMEs. My background is banking and payments for over 20 years now. So thank you. Thanks, Julie, for inviting me to this panel.
Good afternoon. My name is Joanna Wisniewska. I'm with Glenbrook Partners. I am primarily responsible for the financial inclusion practices at Glenbrook. We've been supporting the work of the Gates Foundation around the Level 1 project and inclusive instant payment systems for over 10 years now. My background is I spent most of my career at the U.S. Central Bank, playing different roles. So on the regulatory side, on the payments policy side, as well as on the financial services side. So nice to see so many central bankers in this room. And we'll talk today about some of the work that we recently completed for the Gates Foundation around women's financial inclusion. Super excited.
Thank you. My name is Faith Kobsinje Mugambwa, and I work with the Ministry of Finance in Rwanda, where I'm heading a project that is digitizing SACCOs, over 400 SACCOs, and glad to be here today to discuss the role of women and the inclusion of women into payment systems. My previous life is banking, commercial banking, and then payment systems as well. And so, yes, I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much for introducing yourself. So I guess I'll start by sharing some numbers, which I heard for the first time when I attended the AFI Global Policy Forum in Namibia in September. So if we look across products and channels, women continue to be underserved or entirely unserved. And by this, I mean that globally, 327 million fewer women than men own a smartphone and can access the mobile internet. Women are 10% less likely to have an account at a financial institution. And 742 million women worldwide still do not have a bank account. Yet, the opportunity to serve these women is clear. Studies show that women are smart savers, reliable borrowers, and loyal customers. When satisfied with a banking experience, a woman is likely to tell 9 other people about it. I repeat, 9 other people about it. Closing the gender gap could generate, and for me, this was the most shocking number. Actually, I won't say the number, and I'll try to make you guess. So closing the gap could generate X in additional revenue if women and men were served equally, according to Consumer Centrics, who is effectively a consultancy who has helped many countries in Africa to work on disaggregated, gender disaggregated data. So, okay, any guess on what's the revenue opportunity? Anybody from the audience? Do you think it's in what? Thousands, millions?
Trillions.
Trillions, indeed. $1.7 trillion. I repeat, if women and men were served equally, it represents a 1.7 trillion opportunity, right? So what we are looking at is actually like something very much sizable. And again, if we look at some of the numbers that have been published, Women Business and Law Report estimates that closing the gender gap could increase global GDP by over 20%. Again, 20%, while doubling the current economic growth rate. So I guess like I'll start my question with you, Faith and Jedida. So you both engage directly with financial service providers that work with women. What is your reaction to this figure? Do you recognize some of the challenges that I mentioned? And for you, what are the most persistent barriers faced by women, particularly women entrepreneurs?
So for me, those numbers are very sobering, especially because we've had so many, there's so many initiatives in trying to come up with transformation in the financial sector, digitalizing our payments, and yet we still continue to have such a gap. So very sobering numbers for me. And before we even look at those numbers, I'm sure everybody in the room knows a woman somewhere who fits into that category. You know, they do not have a bank account, or especially if they're in the rural area, they do not even have access to a mobile wallet, not because they don't know about it, but they cannot afford a phone. They cannot afford, you know, or they are not literate to even be able to use a phone. So I think it comes very close to home for each one of us. So yes, those numbers are sobering, and initiatives are continuing, I think, especially for us on the COMESA side. I do not want to preempt what we are doing. I hope you'll ask me later what it is that we are doing to try and close the gap. So yes, very sobering numbers, but very believable. I would hate to imagine what those numbers were before all the work started in that financial space to try and close the gap. Yeah.
I think also as well, the numbers, when you face them in that sense, in trillions, is an eye-opening like shock. But from my experience, yes, I do relate very closely with such examples. I'll give an example from the project I'm currently working under or managing through the Ministry of Finance. So SACCOs are formed when, according to the law in Rwanda, you had to have contribution of capital. You had to buy shares to be a member. So SACCOs are definitely member-owned institutions where you buy, even if it's 500 per share, you have to buy 500 times 1.5 to be a member. When we started digitizing SACCOs, one of the things we had to do is, during the licensing process from Central Bank, is to prepare strategic business plans. And looking at the numbers as they were, some of these SACCOs were not going to break even quickly. So one of the things we looked at was the law, and the regulation and imperatives said that you cannot bank in a SACCO if you don't effectively have shares at the SACCO. So because I am sitting in the position that I'm sitting in, and I am a bulldozer, unapologetically. So we went back and said, look, why don't you allow the law to change so that informal groups can be allowed to bank in SACCOs as customers, not as members, but as customers. They don't have to buy shares, because for you to tell a woman to spend 5,000 to buy 5 shares, to be a member, to be able to bank here, if she can't afford even a meal for her family, you know, that's the African reality. So we went back to the Ministry of Commerce. Through cabinet, it was amended and the law was changed. And so one of the reasons I was saying is, look, if we get more people in the door, SACCOs will be more profitable, and then that means government's investment, you can say, over a period of time, will show some, gains. Once the law changed, and now we had all these informal savings groups coming in, choirs, people who are singing in a choir at church, village women who are sharing together one phone, but they're in a group somehow saving money. The number of customers that started growing was astronomical. We were like, maybe this is fraud, because it was just a big, like, night and day. So these numbers are not just numbers, they're our reality. And because we've been able to make such institutional and hello? Yeah. So we're now at a point where we can actually see sustainable, profitable SACCOs that are coming to the table.
You want to?
Yeah. So yeah, with better performance, not only in terms of profitability, but also share value. So when you ask me, what do these numbers mean to us? For me, this is every day. This is a struggle we fight for every day. This is the push we shout about every day. When laws are made, they are made with the mindset of a man sitting somewhere calculating a cost-benefit analysis on macroeconomic numbers that are not disaggregated. In reality, when you put that law in effect, what does it mean? You're going to, by design, exclude people. And if you exclude people, then they'll choose to keep their money in the mattress. They'll choose to keep their money with friends. They'll choose to keep their money in spaces where they will not be seen. So yes, I've seen this in real life play out. And I think one of the things that the barriers that you asked about the challenges, particularly with entrepreneurs, is that most women, when they are in school, they stay away from STEM subjects: science, technology, economics, mathematics. My father forced me to study math, like it was by force. I hated it. But now I find women who start a tailoring business. She's a great tailor, but very poor at pricing, because she stayed away from math. She cannot know the cost of her inputs in making a jacket. So when she's pricing her jacket, you're like, but if it costs $100 to make a jacket, why are you selling it at 97? When a man who makes the same jacket will sell it at 250 and give you room to bargain. But at the end of the day, he will walk home with a profit. So entrepreneurs, when we come to, in school, you stayed away from math, you stayed away from science, you stayed away from, I don't care if you're going to be a farmer, a tailor, as a woman doing something, a coffee shop, if you cannot understand how to make a profit, if you are not in the networks where women are encouraging you and saying, when the price of coffee is A, you change the price of your cup from D to C. This is why there are taxes. When they tax you, people think that, no, I'll just set up a shop, and then they wonder why 6 months later they're shutting down. Because they priced wrong. Why? They don't understand the economics of business. So where does it start from? The courses we did at school. You do secretarial. No, you do home economics and baking. No one teaches you the mathematics of being in business. So when you wake up and you're 59 and you're now starting entrepreneur, your gig, you're already set for failure, and your male counterparts are like 29 steps ahead of you. So for me, I think some of the things that we really need to work on structurally are also, foundational, but also pulling women into spaces where they can be trained. And I've seen Rwanda do this deliberately, pulling women into spaces where they are trained on, this is the tax law. This is what it means for you to pay corporate tax. This is what you need to do to be compliant for VAT. If you don't pay VAT, this is the fine. The fine is computed like when they see it and they understand it, the light bulb that goes off in their heads is like, wow. I've seen girls who wake up and they're making social enterprise, businesses. And when I walk through the mathematics, I'm like, the design and the good looking things is all one thing, but the mathematics, they're like, wow, I think I need to do things different. So pulling women into networks where they can be educated, guided through business, guided through all these things, digital literacy. How do you go into the system and log your financial claim? How do you declare taxes without waiting for someone to come and do it for you? How do you apply for a visa? Yeah, and where does some of this time disappear? Between having to be a mother, a wife, take care of the home, run around with people's homework, check that the maid has cooked the right food. Where do I get the time to also come back and think about my business? So that the balance between work, home, life, time, we all get 24 hours. But if I'm cooking your food, I'm washing your shirts, I'm cleaning the house, I'm washing the bed sheets, I'm looking after the kids, bro, you have like a whole day plus to think about your life as a man, to be well prepared to think about how to be economic, in terms of entrepreneurship or even in the office space. Whereas as the ladies, it's like by the time you're thinking about, you have like 3 hours to reflect on yourself and what course am I going to do? What do I want to do? Why do I want to do it? Then it's time to sleep and we all have to wake up at the same time or even earlier. So I've tried to put all my points in there.
Thank you. And to just add on to that, and the question you asked about what are some of the challenges that lead to this kind of statistics? One of them is access to a KYC compliant ID. So the woman will have an ID, and so will the man. But if it's not compliant, it needs to be replaced. It's been defaced. Time to go and replace the ID becomes an issue, because if I, as a woman, go to get the ID replaced, what am I losing with that time? What else could I have done with that time? So I will not then have an ID to be able to bank, to be able to go and replace my SIM card, to be able to register for a mobile wallet. So that's one. Number two, literacy. I think I did mention it at the beginning, and Faith has covered it in detail. How do I use this mobile phone that I have? It's very interesting that in the communities, in the very rural communities, people are having to share a phone. I receive my money, and then I now have to change a password so that the next person receives money using the same phone. So all these are things that are really disadvantaging the woman, and it means the structural challenges that we've always faced are still there in many spheres, but mostly in the financial services sector.
Thank you. Thank you, Rose, for sharing your feedback and yeah, also some actions that can be taken in terms of effectively Faith, you mentioned law, right? I guess if I bring us back in the area where we operate, instant payment system and regulations overall, right? Joanna, you work across many jurisdictions. So my first question, and Jedida and Faith have shared the reality on the continent, but is it also like a reality beyond the continent? And if so, can you perhaps share a bit of working across many jurisdictions, your experience in this space, and especially around regulation and instant payments?
It's very tough for me to follow these two ladies. I think they've done a wonderful job already of setting up what are the barriers that women face to financial services access, to broader financial inclusion. And I might just say, you know, women's financial inclusion and women's empowerment is a really broad term. So yes, we have focused in recent work that we've done on what can instant payments specifically do about that. But before we get into that, which hopefully we can share some really practical elements there, I want to say, I mean, how much time do we have for this? Because we really could talk for 2-3 hours about all the barriers that women face globally. So this is, yes, this is a bigger problem for low income women. And I also want to say, not all women are the same. So we know in these conversations, you know, we use kind of these generic terms of women's inclusion and women need this and women face these barriers. I just want to acknowledge that, you know, we're largely focused on low income women. And, you know, some of these barriers are common to them. So just want to stress that. There are so many studies, so many numbers that talk about the potential benefits of addressing women's financial inclusion. We could spend the next several hours, right, talking about that. So the problem has been established. I think we need to move the conversation now from what is the problem, right, globally? This is a problem globally. What is the problem and what do we do about it? Right.
Yeah, and I guess like for me, in fact, when it comes to what do we do about it, like I'd like to start with you, Faith, because you already share an example around how changing a law for SACCOs like had a massive impact. But now, if we focus more on regulations, and to be fair, like I see often in terms of like central bank priorities, financial inclusion, but also gender inclusion. So when it's effectively like, you know, come to implementing a gender inclusion policy framework, what are the key components that should be in place?
So in terms of, and I think I'll borrow from what Redemptor said earlier. I love the Rwandan model because it starts from the top down. So starting from the constitution requires that we have at least 30% seats assigned to women in any decision-making body. 30%. So you're not just talking about government or private sector, public sector, local government. We have to have 30% women in decision-making roles. And this is not tokenization. You must earn your place. We don't just put you as a minister because you carry the look. No, you have to have studied, you have to have the experience, you have to meet, you know, get in there and do the job. So such laws begin to create room for things like what we have trickling down is we have what is called the National Women Council within the local government, where even at the district level, it is actually gender measured. So institutions report how many women are in leadership roles. For example, the financial sector today, 40% MDs are women. Cabinet is 64% women. The legislature, judiciary is about 43% are women. And it's not just to throw people in there for numbers' sake. You must sit in the role you've been given or you've been appointed to or you have applied for and deliver. When it comes then down to places like at the very grassroots, we do have what is called a gender monitoring office that collects data on disaggregated gender data on roles, literally. So how many people do you have in boards? How many people do you have? And how many of those are women? So every institution, whether government or private sector, or we do report on this. As long as you have an operating license for anything, you have to report. And that means that the law then, in terms of financial inclusion, also starts to say, how easy is it for a woman to own property, right? And so we have now laws in place that enable women to own property. We have laws in place, or we have initiatives in place where women-led households are recognized. Previously, a woman would have to maybe get her son or an uncle or her brother to represent her home, but now women-led households are recognized, and this particularly touches on the social protection space, which is, you know, the vulnerable, the elderly, disabled, youth. We also have programs that are anchored in law to help with, it's called nutritional support, but it's literally a woman who is low income and low earning and cannot afford to look after herself during the 9 months of pregnancy. You basically register for a government support program where they do give cash-enabled support for the 9 months that a woman is pregnant to the first 2 years after the child is born. And all these are tracked through the Ministry of Health. So you go to the health center where you go for your antenatals. All this is infringed, and, you know, it's not just happening as an intervention. It comes from the law, the policy, and then mechanisms to have that policy in place. And each of these, as you look at them, at the very tail end of it is a payment. I have to get paid. I have to get a support. I have to get a subsidy. If I was in location 1, where I have been getting my antenatals and have been, you know, supported by government for this facility, when I go to have my child where my mother is in location, you know, province, another province, does the data keep track of me as the same person, or am I dropped off because, you know, the numbers don't tally, in the sense that I appeared in province A, now I'm appearing in province B, it means I'm two separate people. So, you know, and measures have been taken to make sure that these DPIs work and they are checked and they are tracked to ensure that women, when we say, yes, women are included, you can actually track it down to the last. I think Joanna mentioned something about yesterday about the Central Bank of Rwanda having a financial inclusion dashboard, and the data is updated weekly at a gender disaggregated level. So the systems are in place, the systems are working, and when you're a citizen and you see these things are actually there to help and to improve the lives of people, you collaborate, you participate, you're confident to take part. And I think what I would like to maybe talk about in terms of ID is the element of anonymity. Sometimes due to, you know, situations, for example, a young girl has gotten pregnant and she's trying not to get known by, you know, the society, but still needs to be supported. How do such cases not get lost when it comes to, you know, financial support that is being passed on through social protection programs, through government, or through vaccination support in one way or another? Because I want to be known by my national ID, but for my situation now, I don't want to be known, right? And some of these things don't make sense to men because none of you will ever be pregnant. But if you were told that John will wake up one day and he's elderly, he begins to think about products that will support elderly people. If the likelihood that Matthew would be disabled in his life as a career person, he starts thinking, okay, disability, if it happens, maybe, so you see that design starts happening because it relates to you, but you will never be a woman. So you cannot think about some of these things if you're not in the place of, so even the laws, the interventions, the payment mechanisms, the amounts that are paid, are they equitable? All these things trickle down to getting more women involved, not just at the grassroots, but even at the decision-making level. if you're sitting at a decision-making space, looking at a law, looking at a framework, you're not looking at it just for the country. Your mind is also tuned to the fact that there's a girl out there who needs to go to school. So, yeah.
Thank you for this. And I think for me, I'd like to double click and bring Jedida on this discussion to something that you mentioned, which is gender inclusion must be thought at in every single layer, whether it's effectively like the law, the regulations, the policy, all across the DPIs as well, like identity and payment, right? So I guess like coming back to the payment layer, Jedida, like you're working on implementing DRPP across the COMESA region, as you mentioned earlier, and this is a solution that target SMEs. In this pool, there will be women SMEs. So how do you make sure that at the scheme level, at the product level, women are actually included?
Thanks for that. And I will just give a bit of a background. So, and this is from a COMESA perspective. So as COMESA, we have a payment system which has been there for years for cross-border, which we are very proud of because we always said it ensured that an importer and an exporter traded in the currency, that stores value, which is the dollars. But over time, the realization that there's a certain constituent that is not included in that space is what then led to the digital retail payment platform. Of course, after some studies were done. And the beauty about that is when we were now designing the digital retail payment platform, we already had the woman component at the back of our minds because that's the problem we're trying to solve. So what I would say is you have to be intentional about the design. You cannot design the product and then come back and say, oh, we forgot the women, the low income, the youth who've been underserved and excluded. Let's find a way to, include them, which means already your product was never meant for them. You're just trying to sort of panel beat it for that, and it may not achieve the results it requires. That's number one. So we got it right from the beginning. And how then does it translate to helping the underserved, especially the women and the youth? One is the pricing. We are still refining our pricing model, but we are very intentional of what we want those figures not to be. They cannot be beyond the SDG goals. They cannot be unaffordable to a point where today we saw the presentation from Central Bank of Kenya, which for me was quite an eye-opener. Some of the costs translate to as much as 7% of the value of the transaction, which is ridiculous, really. It just locks out some of the people. Now, number two, we got a mention, I think, from the Liberia team about Mojaloop 17, which is the newest release. And I would like to believe that even for the DRPP, it will allow the DFSPs to have capability for integration with SACCOs, for example, which then will be supporting the very people who are underbanked, underserved, but have access to these SACCOs, societies, burial societies. They will get to that benefit from the design of the DRPP. Another thing that comes to mind is not having a solution that is fit for everybody. So with the DRPP, because we may not have direct interface with the end user, which is with the woman, we are really providing a rail, but we will work, and we are working with the DFSPs or the financial service providers, the mobile network operators, the non-banks, so that they will reach the woman, the youth at the level of their comfort. So if it means when you're doing out a message, it's in the language that is understood by the user. If, translation services or ensuring that it's not a one size fits all, do you have the capacity to then address the challenges that the very people you're trying to uplift can be uplifted from that situation. So that's what the DRPP is trying to do, and I believe we will achieve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing some insight on this and like what are concrete initiatives that you can do. And indeed, I think like from one of the core principles of Moja Loop has always been to be a venue where all type of DSSP can join and meeting the user where they are, right? Any type of users. You mentioned as well like the importance of product design, and I do believe that for effectively DRPP, it means again like what are the scheme rules being implemented, and pricing is typically part of the scheme rules as well, and what's the technology, right? And I'd like to bring you, Joanna, in this conversation as well, because you've been working on, as we can see on the screen, the L1P Women Inclusion Toolkit with the Gates Foundation. So perhaps could you share a bit more about like, you know, this initiative and how like this resource can be effectively used? Sorry, Evitin, can we use my laptop?
Does this work? We set this up. We started this project of trying to answer the question of, Jadida, you said design needs to be intentional. So we tried to answer the question of what does intentional design in inclusive instant payment systems actually look like, right? So we have a, and maybe I should back up a little bit. Hold on, just 1 second. Let me set this up. I think everyone in this room is familiar with the Level 1 project, but just very briefly, the Level 1 project is an initiative of the Gates Foundation that looks at inclusive instant payment systems as a way to address end user needs for convenience, affordability, and usefulness in digital payments. So as part of that work, and the Level 1 project presents a set of principles as well as practices now for what does that mean? What does inclusive instant payment system mean? So for this project, for the Women's Inclusion Toolkit, we took that question a step further and we asked, what are the specifics? What are the how? What are the practical elements of how you design and implement these principles and practices to be inclusive of women? You know, when we started this project, we heard from some, we heard the term that, you know, infrastructure and technology, well, that's neutral. How can you make that gender intentional? Well, hopefully the toolkit that we have come up with will show that there are very deliberate, specific ways to make design decisions that will be deliberately, well, the design decisions will be in place to address some of the barriers that women face. But what I want to emphasize is that this does not mean that the instant payment system is just designed for women. What we discovered through this process is that designing for women, identifying some of those barriers that women face, and then putting the practical design elements in place for IPS actually creates just better design for everybody, right? So it meets broader economic goals for economies. It contributes to scale of instant payment systems. So, you know, we like to say that really designing for women means better design for everyone. So with that, we are super excited. I think this is the kind of the official unveiling of the Women's Inclusion Toolkit. And I will just say, while I'm the one standing here and talking about it, this took a tremendous, effort on many people's parts, including Julie here, who was part of a council that advised our work. So I want to recognize that and thank you. So we won't go through the actual website, but I encourage all of you to please go on this website, really easy to remember, l1p.org, and see all the resources that are here. And the Women's Inclusion Toolkit is both a a separate kind of a space on the website where you can specifically focus on this on women's inclusion tools. But we took a bit of a sneaky approach where the practices and guidance that we identified for building good design for women is also embedded overall in the principles and the practice of L1P. So even if you don't intentionally look for the women's inclusion toolkit, we're gonna serve it up to you anyway. Should I use this one? Is this one work? Nope. That's okay. I can hold on to this one. Okay, so this is the homepage for the women for L1P.org. You will see here, there are really two ways to get to the actual Women's Inclusion Toolkit. We made it very easy for you. So here you'll see kind of this banner right on top where you can click on Explore for the toolkit. You can also find it under Principles, Practices, and Lenses. So one of the lenses that we applied is women's inclusion. So let's lay this will work. And there are two other lenses. Won't go into that just for the interest of time, because I could talk about this for the next hour, which Julie won't let me. So I'm going to focus on the Women's Inclusion Toolkit. And so what are the components of the toolkit that you will find here? So 3 key elements, and I'll just scroll, but hopefully you will spend the time yourself to play with this. There are really 3 key elements to this. So one is what we're calling the why paper. And this really captures all of the evidence that is already out there for why it's important to serve women. And that includes all the, well, really the ethical reasons for serving women, the scale reasons, scale of the IPS, the economic reasons for participants, as well as the economic reasons. So that this gets into all of the why and all of the evidence for why it's important to serve women and why these individual practices and guidance in particular can help to address those barriers. So encourage you to go into this toolkit, into the paper. This is a tool that we're really excited about, and I'm gonna click on it in a second. So we've also designed this inclusive IPS alignment tool where IPS implementers, as well as regulators and policymakers who create the ecosystem and environment and the enablers that are important for success, can go in and actually really interact with these practices and guidance from the context of their own payment systems. So they can click on the different principles, say, okay, I do this practice already. I don't do this. What are some of the specific examples for how I could do this? And it helps to create this light roadmap, I would say, of what are some of the additional things that you can do? What are additional actions you can take to actually implement an inclusive gender intentional toolkit? And then finally, the third element here on the bottom is the actual set of practices that take particular importance in the when we apply the women's inclusion lens. But just in the interest of time, I will click on this alignment tool just to make it a little bit more real, so you can see what is in here. So you're able to go into this alignment tool. Let's just start, and we'll go through kind of one example. So there are 7 level 1 project inclusive design principles: instant payment, interoperable, pay everywhere for anything, inclusive governance, low fees for end users, safe payments, and shared capabilities. And some of you who were part of the L1P workshop yesterday got to dig into these in a lot more detail. I'm going to just pick one. So let's pick inclusive governance. But you can pick any of these principles to learn more about them. So let's choose inclusive governance. We'll go next. And here you have an opportunity to ask certain questions that are specific to your payment system. And here are some helpful questions that are specific to this principle, such as to help you determine essentially where you sit in terms of alignment with supporting this specific principle. So for example, in this practice and inclusive governance, in this principle, inclusive governance, there are questions such as, do you aim for a gender balance in scheme leadership and staff? Faith talked about that. Do you insist on women's voices in decision-making, right? So it's not just about putting a target in place and checking the box. Do you actually ensure that women's voices are heard? So you can answer some of these questions. And then at the bottom, well, this should work. You'll get an indication of kind of where does your system sit. Well, let's just say it's a kind of you partially address this practice. Actually, I'm going to go back. Sorry about that. Along here on the side, we're not going to be able to go into any of these details, but there are a ton of resources that are available for you, such as market illustrations. So what are some other IPS doing in this space, right? Again, we want to make this real. We don't want this to be theoretical. What are some specific examples of what others are doing? And as well as what are some of the kind of detailed design guidance that can help you implement these principles and practices. So you'll see tons of tools that we call here on the side. You can go through this process for all of the practices. We're not going to be able to do that, but at the end, you basically get kind of a light version of a roadmap to help you then continue this process, right? Because embedding women's inclusion into instant payment system is not a process you do once. It's something that's obviously an evolution and you continue to implement. So I think I'm being cut off, even though I could talk for much longer.
Thank you so much for this, and yeah, congratulations on the launch again. And I guess, sort of breaking news for adopters of Mojaloop. So as Joanna mentioned, the Mojaloop Foundation has been collaborating on this. So we'll be looking going forward at implementing the principle on every single Mojaloop deployment that we do, including COMESA, of course, DRPPOI. Well, as Joanna mentioned, unfortunately, we're running out of time, and I think we're gonna, be kicked off the stage soon for the next panel. But unfortunately, we don't really have time for Q&A. Yet again, all of these resources are free, l1p.org. Please visit the website, and Faith, Jedida, and Joanna are going to be around for the next 3 days. So if you have any specific question on this, please feel free to find them and ask. Thank you so much.